I would like to call the meeting to order. Mary, would you lead the group in the pledge to the flag?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Dr. Head, has the meeting notice been posted?
Yes, I can certify it was posted in accordance with the law.
Thank you. The purpose of the meeting today is to review the recommended 2017-18 budget. And Dr. Head, would you proceed?
So we are not a... Okay, thank you. I thought we'd lost... So for the board's sake, we are not, this is not a board, you're not approving the budget. We're going through the budget. And we want to keep this, there's a formal presentation, but we want to, this is a discussion about the budget like we normally do. And so we have an hour and a half. The next meeting starts at 5. And so the way the meeting would go is I'm going to give a general overview of where we are, just as a reminder, because some board members are newer than others. So I'll give an overview so you get a kind of the scope of where we are. And then I have listed in here budget assumptions, things that we're thinking about and what we see happening from 2017 to 2022. Some enrollment projections and population growth and the way we see the budget and assessed value. So I have about 15 minutes of overview, and then the rest of it will be Jennifer, who is going to go into detail about some of the philosophies behind it and some of the actual dollars. So feel free to, whenever you have any questions, but okay. Am I using the right one? Nope, I'm not. Never mind. Got it. I'm good. I was using the one for this screen. Okay, so this is, I know you've seen a lot of this, but I think it's a good reminder as we're putting these things together just to, we are one of the largest community colleges in the country right now, and so we're larger and getting larger. You might take a look down at, so next year our construction budget and operating budget, we're projecting it to be $525 million, and now we've gone over 7,000 employees, so we're a very large operation.
On the 95,000 students, plus students, does that include dual credit students? It does, okay.
Yes, there's about 13,000 dual credit students. 13,000.
Thank you.
We're the second largest in the state. So this is where we are. So we've got 6 campuses, and for you, okay, I just want to make this clear with the presidents. We put campuses in here this time. When they're out in the community, they refer to them as colleges, just so we're clear. We're not, we're Lone Star College, but when they're out there, they're their college presidents. So we have 7 centers right now. We also have, keep in mind that we did not include the Chief facility. We did not include the facility over at Tomball at the hospital. That's not here. So we've got the 7 centers. Then we've got these 2 other locations and the health professions building. So we got 3 other locations. I think that's it. So we've got about 10 off-campus sites that we have. And then this is what we have coming up. And some of these are centers and some are just buildings. And the reason I'm pointing all this out is we have put money in the budget for this, but this means additional money. It means additional people. It's a comprehensive operational and budgeting issue that we have to take a look at as we think in the future. So all of our planning, by the way, we're thinking in 5-year terms. And this is, I want to reinforce this because you may be hearing a lot about this in the community, but we're really focused on the workforce piece right now, and you're going to see that reflected in our budget. But most of these new centers are focused on the workforce piece. And we have the academic piece and a couple of the college, like it coming up over at University Park, for example, and Sci-Fair. Just a reminder what our mission is and what our vision is, and we've had this now for 6 or 7 years, 7 or 8 years, and we take a look at this periodically, but it still, I think, reflects what we believe in. You've seen this a lot, but I think it's worth repeating again that this is the way we think of things. These are our strategic goals, and there are many pieces to what student success is, but in general, that's the way we take a look at the way we do operations, and that's the way we do budgets. And you'll see that when Jennifer gives the budget proposal, she's going to zero in on these topics so that you can match up the dollars with the goals that we have. Just a reminder where we are and how where we rank across the country. You've seen this on several occasions. One of our budget objectives is to increase the number of African American graduates and degrees. I'd be happy if we were number one all the way across, but we especially need to work on that 16 needs to be higher. That's 16 out of 1,130 or so in AACC. I think there are 1,100, there's probably 1,200 community colleges right now, so we're number 16 out of that. This is where we are with the high schools, and we've got some work to do here. The actual percentages are dropping coming out of the high schools, and that's because the community college enrollments are dropping, period. We had a discussion about this afternoon, so we're going to be doing some work to figure out where those students are going. And keep in mind that we're very active in transfer. This is how many people we transferred last year. And let me talk a little bit about budget assumptions. And I put these together before. We're on slide 14, and Jennifer comes up in slide 22. So I want to remind everybody that we're operating on business principles and practices, and I'm really clear that we're in the business of teaching and learning. We're teaching and learning institute, but it is a business, and we're in that is our business, so we have to operate on those principles. We also are looking at budgeting parameters and formulas. For example, we'll be working with the college presidents to make sure that we keep our personnel cost within a reasonable percentage, because if we get ourselves too top-heavy, we're going to limit what we can do in the future. We need to make sure that we have contingencies and that we are fully funded in certain areas and not borrowing money from one area to get through the year. We do not want to be doing that. One of our major priorities is the AAA rating. We will go back to Standard & Poor's in probably sometime in 18, spring 18, middle of 18, something like that, to come back for the last part of our bond. So we want to make sure. And those of you who were, Dr. Smith was, and Kyle Scott, Dr. Scott were with us in New York, but that's millions of dollars at stake for us. That AAA rating, if that drops, that means we have to pay higher interest rates on $150 million. So we have, we put 20% cash reserve, but keep in mind that that's the budget assumption from 2017 to 22. And we know that that's a discussion. We have Standard & Poor's recommended that we get up to 20. And Jennifer is following up with Standard & Poor's to see what all that means and what the implications for that are. So we put that as a goal, and you can see that in some of our planning, but that's another discussion that we would have with the board about what's reasonable and what impacts our credit rating is the biggest issue that we have here. We are assuming that the state funding and the tax rate will remain relatively level. We've also, in the next couple of years, we would like to keep our tuition level, our in-district tuition, and you're going to see some recommendations that we have about this. Every year, we've been talking, when we had the workshops, the budget workshops, we showed you generally the tuition percentage will be about 35% of the budget. The tax piece of this will be 41%. And then the state, you're going to see some charts. Jennifer has some charts about where that is. We're at 21 this coming year, something like that, 21 or 2021, I believe. But we know what the state appropriations are. We know where we're headed, and that we know that that is going to drop as a percentage of our budget. It will drop. So we have decisions to make, and we have some recommendations for that on how to make up that is we grow and we add more money to our budget. If the state budget is remaining the same, then we have to make some decisions about where the money is coming from. You can see that we're assuming the 2.5 to 3% annual growth. Even with modest, even taking a look at that, knowing what's coming, and we're looking at census, and we think we're going to be adding at least 10,000 students, and we were conservative in that, but that's based on a couple of different factors. You can either add the 3% annually, which we think is still conservative, or if you want to take a look down at that bottom, we enroll about 4% of the population, and that number keeps going up. That means we're getting, back when I think when we first started doing the chart, back about 15 years ago, 16, we received about 2.2 or 2.3% of the population. We've gone up to 4, which is really good, by the way. So the other one I've already talked about. And these are just some other issues for us when we do the budget. So we've got the new facilities coming on, which we have to budget for. We've got aging facilities, which means we have to put money in, just like in your household. I don't know whether that's rain or the air conditioner. We have, it's just like your house. Our facilities, North Harris opened in 1973 or so. So we've got facilities that are 40s, whatever that, 45 years old, something like whatever that number is, 45, 44 years old. We've got chillers, we've got roofs, we have infrastructure that needs to be replaced on a regular basis. Right now, we've got $5.5 million in the R&R money, and we're adding money each year. We're going to be adding $1 million over the next 5 years. So we've got a couple of special programs we're going to be talking about, and then we've got these other opportunities to supplement our revenue, which is leasing, which we've talked about before, and the corporate college, and on international, some of our international ventures. So let me just, a couple of more slides here. Let me just show you where the growth is coming from. The growth is in the purple areas, or whatever color that is. It's that rose color. If you're looking at it on the screen, it is the rose color and then the blue color is where our growth is coming from. But you can see most of it's coming from Cy-Fair and Conroe. We have no areas that are declining, by the way, so everything is growing, but those are the major ones. So just kind of file that away, because that's the way we take a look at things. These are the head count predictions for us, and you've seen this chart a number of times. We keep adjusting it, but we're pretty much on target with this. And this has implications for our program. So what's happening is that the Hispanic population is increasing every year. The Anglo population is dropping, and the African American population has been dropping, but I think that is going to stabilize around 15 or so. I don't think that is a percentage of the enrollees at our college. But I think that one's been, I think you'll see that one leveling out. I think what you're going to see is the percentage of Anglos dropping, is the percentage of our enrollment, and Hispanics going up. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn this over. I think you've seen nearly all of those, but that's just the backdrop to the budget proposals. Do you need this?
These slides you're getting, can we get those?
Yes. Yeah, can we send, when we get through, send those slides to the board? Yes.
Okay, good afternoon. So going into the recommended FY 2018 budget. First, just to show, starting off with revenues, the sources of funds, what you see here is for last year, FY 16, the actual revenue percentage, this year's projected revenues, and what the proposal is for next year. You can see that tuition from students, this is in district and out of district and out of state, all students, is staying flat at 33% across the 3 years. And as Dr. Head mentioned previously, the state percentage is declining. It has gone from 23% in 2016 to next year's proposed revenues of 21%. And local taxes has pretty much picked up the balance of that. at this point, going from 38% from last year to 41% in next year's recommended budget.
So let me just, so when we do next year, we could actually do FY 2019 probably if we wanted to. So the state, the amount of money that the state gives us will be the same for this coming year and then the year after that. So that's how we know that the percentage, overall percentage, is going to drop. So that is the one fixed piece that we have.
Yeah. And then a small decrease in miscellaneous revenues from 6% to 5%. So this is our projected assessed values in the area. As you can see, there was tremendous growth in 14, 15, and 16, going up as high as 13.5%, but that growth has begun to decline. This current year, the growth was 7.5%. Next year, we are currently projecting 4.9% growth in assessed values.
So, and I'm not going to interrupt you on every slide, but I want to make sure you understand what's going on here, because the state legislature, if they go back into special session, one of the items that they're going to be talking about is property tax reform, and really part of that it's part of its reform, but part of it is putting a cap on assessed value for taxation purposes, and where you would have to have an election or a rollback, and there's debates about that. So previously it was 8%. If we went above 8%, we would subject ourselves to a rollback election, which is why we lowered our tax rate for the last 4. You're going to see another, I think right after this. We had lowered our taxes for the last 4 years so that we could stay under that. Thank you. Under that rate. Now, and go back to the other one just for, so no matter what happens right now, I think we're going to be in good shape, whether it be 5% or 6%, if it, just so I'm clear about that, you think that's a conservative number. Those are preliminary numbers, and it may or may not be higher than that. I think we're in good shape any way you look at it. We put our budget together based on 5%, right?
Yes, increase in the revenue. This is
Right.
in the assessed values.
So if they come back and change the law from 8% to 5%, we're in good shape. No matter what, because we've already we were assuming that law was going to be changed just to be safe in our thinking. I want to make sure everybody's clear about that. So, okay.
And just, I think, an additional thing to note on this, obviously you can see the split between Harris County and Montgomery County. The majority of the slowdown in growth was seen in Harris County, not nearly as much in Montgomery County, but Harris County does make up still 75%.
75% of our revenue comes out of Harris County, right? Our tax revenue.
Yeah, and they're the ones where their preliminary value growth was somewhere around 3-something%, where it was 6 or 7 for Montgomery.
Is there any movement to value commercial property in accordance with its fair market value?
I believe there's already the uniform law is in place for the state for how commercial properties get valued, and really under that law is why I think last year and the year prior we saw a lot of markdowns on commercial properties that happened throughout Harris County. But my understanding from the Harris County Appraisal District is they were doing a lot of catch-up on lawsuits, and a lot got settled all at once. So a lot of that's been done on that uniform market value law that's been in effect at the state level, if that's what you're asking about.
Well, I've read an awful lot of dialogue about the claim that large commercial facilities are on the tax values much lower than they're actually valued in the marketplace. Is that incorrect?
I think it's a matter of the interpretation of market value. The uniform law says that a property has to be valued according to equivalent comparable properties. One of the difficulties you get into with commercial properties is finding an equivalent, a comparable property, and usually the commercial interests are able to find other properties that helps them drive down their values. So that has been an argument out there. I know that was something being dealt with in Harris County. But at this point, that would have to be changed at the state level for that to change, the uniform valuation rules.
Okay.
So from assessed values to tax revenues, here you can see the proposed FY18 budget has us keeping the tax rate flat at the 10.78. Tax revenues do go up as a result of the increase in assessed values. And you can see the split here between the M&O rate and the debt service tax rate. And as Dr. had mentioned, the tax rate had been reduced 4 times to get to the current 10.78. And at this point, we would recommend leaving it flat at the 10.78 for the next budget year. And my expectation is that this rate would likely be lower than that rollback tax rate. So I do not expect we would be triggering that at this 10.78 rate.
Jennifer, I have a question. Since I've been on the board, we have lowered the tax rate every year, just a tad bit, as you see. Now, what would happen financially to us if a decision was made to lower the current rate, say by, I'm just giving an example, by 0.0001?
Yeah, that would, the reduction of the 0.001 would be a loss of 195,000 in operating revenue. So in the M&O side, it would be about 195,000 reduction in the operating budget. And to a household, a $300,000 household, that is 30 cents a year.
How much?
Saved. 30 cents a year that would be saved on their tax bill for a $300,000 home for a 0.0001 reduction in the tax rate.
Now, the average homes in my area is much less than that. What's the average? Do you have any idea what the average value is of a home in Harris County? I mean, well, not necessarily Harris County, but in the Lone Star portion of Harris County.
Yeah, I was probably more likely to know it in Harris County rather than the Lone Star area. But I don't, that's something I could probably get for Harris County. I'll have to find out if we have that same data for the Lone Star area, since it has its own boundaries.
I don't know what it is. We have that information though. So okay. We'll get that for you.
Okay.
Jennifer, and when you said that if we keep the tax rate flat, we should come in below the rollback, is that taking into consideration what may come up in a special session of the legislature?
Yes, because as Dr. had mentioned, we've been budgeting at that 5%.
So we're taking that into consideration.
I mean, that's a good question, and we've been talking about that, but I think that one reason, and really for some of you who've not been through this before, we normally would do this in July, but we accelerated the process so that we had time to see what was going on, and we knew we had a pretty good feeling about the state appropriations, and we also have a different budgeting philosophy. We're budgeting conservatively on the growth and everything else, and not counting on things that may or may not happen. So we will know. First of all, I think we're going to be fine regardless because of the way we budgeted. In our 5-year plan, the way that we put this on, the way we put our budget together this year, it is based on 5% growth. So I think no matter what they do, we're fine with that. So the question really for the board, and not today, is this issue of if we lowered the tax rate by 0.001, we are minus $195,000, which we can make up if that's what you want to do. So
Not really.
right, okay.
I have another related question, but I don't know if Jennifer can answer it. Amos may need to. Or perhaps, I think Amos maybe. What is the latest date that the legislature and the governor could pass this proposed drop in the rollback and have it take effect for the tax year coming up? Anybody know? Because we don't know if the governor is going to call a special session. We know Lieutenant Governor wants that tax reform to be part of it. So at what point can we call ourselves safe for the 2017-18 year?
He does have some limitations on duration of which he can call it, so he has, right now, he's got about 30 days from the end of the regular session to decide whether we're going to special or not.
Okay.
And then from there, it'll be a special item session, and then we'll see.
How long
from
would
there.
they
So
stay in session, though?
it'll depend on how long it takes to get the items that he puts on that.
There's not a legal issue on how long, when they have to make,
He could set a time limit where he could extend it if that were to expire as well. So he should, everything we're hearing is there will be a special session. It shouldn't last more than a week, maybe two. And it'll be because they already know what items are going to be called, already know what items will be heard. It'll just be the process then of the timeline that it takes for a bill to transition through to be voted on, so.
And if they pass that limitation on the rollback, when would it take effect? This upcoming tax year or the following? Do we have any idea?
Depend on the way that it's written,
Oh, goody.
but more than likely, it would go, the law typically would go in effect 9/1. That's typically we would see the law start to change, which would impact.
So it could impact this budget that we're considering now.
Could.
That's my concern. Okay, thank you very much.
but again, I would feel if we were projecting 7% increase in our projections, there's two separate issues. One is what we have in the tax revenues. Jennifer, go to the one after this, I think.
Yeah, if I might, I mean, so tax revenues, we're only projecting to increase by 5%. So let's say that passes and it caps 5%. And so even if our growth in assessed values come in higher, say they come in 7%, that would mean that the 1078 might trigger the rollback tax rate, and we'd have to lower the tax rate. But because it's higher assessed values, we can still generate the same amount of revenues because we're only projecting a 5% increase in revenues. That's the key. So regardless of what really happens with assessed values and tax rates, we're only projecting 5% increase in tax revenues, which is what is currently in that bill. So even if it were to pass, this budget would not be impacted.
So we may, if the law changes, we may have to lower our tax rate anyway to avoid a rollback.
Right. But it would generate the same amount of revenues.
I have a question.
That makes sense? Yeah.
If we lower the tax rate,
Right.
property tax rate, I guess, would that have any effect on student tuition or no?
No.
Okay.
Not now. That's why we keep taking a look at this, and I think what we were talking about is after we do the budget, then we would have a budget workshop sometime in October, so you can see what we see on the horizon. Once we approve this budget, that's one issue. Going forward is another issue, and the way we have it projected right now, and you're going to see some recommendations in just a minute about out of district and out of state, that we would like to keep the tax rate either the same or flat, or the same or flat, the same or reduce it. We would like to keep tuition at the same level for the next couple of years, and we have other ways to do that. I'm talking about in-district tuition. So, so to answer your question, though, in year 3 and 4, yes, it does. It has an impact on possibly. That's what we would talk about in the retreat over how we're going to be handling that. I mean, since Dr. Scott just came in, one of the things we've been talking about, if we had formulas that we use where we say, well, students are going to pay, historically, since I've been here for 33 years, generally what we were thinking was that students would pay about a third of the cost of education. But that formula has changed over the year because the state contribution keeps dropping. So the question for the board and for all of us is, how much do you want students to pay? How much do you want taxpayers to pay? And how much the state? So right now, we're at about 33 for students. We're at, yeah, right there. You can see that. The issue for us is going to be, though, going forward as we go, well, first of all, community college enrollments are not growing across the state. So they added a little money to the budget this year. The only reason we picked up $3.8 million in new money each year because we took it from other colleges. because of our growth. They redistribute the money. So some colleges near us lost some major dollars. We picked it up because of our growth. If we don't grow, then we have a problem. So the question is, how are you going to make that 1%? 1% of our budget, by the way, if we change, is 3.7. Right now, it's $3.7 million. 1% of our budget is 3.7. So if that drops, if the state piece drops to 20% next year, we have to make up. It's either cut expenses. We have to account for the $3.7 million somewhere. Does that help? Okay. I think you'll see it in a different. Once we get in later, when we do the 5-year projections up there, you see how everything impacts something else. Anything we do now impacts us downstream. So I personally am looking at it from 2022 and where do we think we want to be in 2022 and kind of going backwards from there.
So this is just another look at that tax rate over a 15-year period, us versus the state, and you can see our trend has essentially most recently been opposite of the state, with the state average trending up and Lone Star College trending down, and then most recently flat. I know it looks like a straight line, but there is in there some of those small increases over the past couple of years in the tax rate. So then looking at tuition, this is in-district tuition. You can see for Lone Star for the fall, the board here already approved increases to the differential fee and the technology fee, so that increased tuition for 12 credit hours from $874 to $910. And you can see this comparison to other community colleges, and what we've shown here too is the change from one year to the next. So you can also see who else has increased. So you can see that Lee, Alvin, and Alamo are the other community colleges that have raised their tuition, while most of the others had kept theirs flat. Here is the out-of-district tuition comparison. So first for Lone Star, in the fall, tuition for 12 credit hours has increased from the $17.14 to the $18.10. This is reflecting, again, the already approved differential fee, technology fee, and a $5 increase in the out-of-district fee. As part of this budget, an additional recommendation is to raise that out-of-district fee an additional $10 in the spring. That would increase the tuition to the $19.30. And this is, again, is to reduce the subsidy, right? We have essentially been subsidizing out-of-district students in total by about $36 a credit hour. So in the 5-year plan, the hope is to catch up over about a 3-year period. And this would be the first step of that.
Let me make sure this is important. This is a critical piece of our budget recommendation. So with Jennifer here, we've been taking a close look at actual cost and kind of boring in on our budgets in a different way. So we have been subsidizing out-of-district students to the tune of $36 a credit hour. So what we're proposing is over a 2-year period or 3-year period.
3-year period, beginning with this year.
That we want them to pay their portion of this. And if we do that, then we can, right now, I personally don't think it makes a lot of sense for us to be raising our own tuition and subsidizing out of district and out of state, because that's what we're doing, that's what we've been doing, and now we're taking a close look at this. We want to raise that tuition for out of district and out of state and get it up so that it's on par proportionally. And so taxpayers are not subsidizing out of district. So what that means, though, is that we would raise it. You've already approved
the $5.
$5. The more we took a look at the budget, we want to come back and propose another $10 increase in the spring. We already have the catalog, the schedules out. So that would mean a net 15, and then we'll come back. But we're doing 15, 10. How are we doing that?
For out of district, the thought was to do 15, 10, and 10 to get us to about $35.
Right. Over a 3-year period, and then out of state, we want to do the same thing. We want to raise those fees. We're subsidizing that to the tune of.
So out of state, we're subsidizing $76 a credit hour. So the proposal for FY18 is the same as out of district, the $5 that's already approved for the fall, and then an additional 10 in the spring, and then the following 2 years to catch up. The thought was 30, 30.
That's out of state and international.
Yes.
The fees are the same on that.
So we're trying to make up the difference between what in-district students pay, the 33% of the total budget, and what we're picking up in local taxes. But all we get is local taxes. So out of state are not paying any more.
We get no contact
This is
hour
the
for
student- the
out-of-state
state money.
students and international students. So we don't,
No contact hour?
right, so we're trying to make up all that difference. Do you want to, we've got the,
So we get no reimbursement from the state.
right, we just
as
get the
well
tuition.
as-
Right. All we get is tuition and fees. The only way we recoup the money is in the tuition and fees that not contact hour reimbursement. Right?
Right, so for out of district, right, what we're losing there, if they live out of district, is the property taxes. So that 41% of our revenues equates to about $110 per credit hour, and we were currently charging with the approved $5, $75. So that's how we get to the about $36 subsidy. When you then move to out of state, there's that $36 from losing the tax revenues, but then we don't get reimbursement on those contact hours. So the state revenues, the 21% of our budget, equates to about another 57 per credit hour. So total out of state, their fee should be about $168 per credit hour, and we've been, the current fee with the $5 increase is $90. So that's there where we get about a $76 subsidy per credit hour. So it's to make up for these revenues that those students do not generate for the community college.
So it's just a,
It's,
go ahead.
I can see immediately that we'd have to make up the difference between an in-district student and an out-of-district student in the local tax, the ad valorem tax that we collect for in-district properties. And now I understand that students that live outside the district, now they do or they do not, we do not get.
if they're state resident and they live outside of the district, we get paid. If they live in the state of Texas, we get reimbursed for that. If they live outside of the state or international, we do not get contact hour reimbursement. for
Okay,
that.
how can a student attend? I mean, logically, how can a student attend and not live at least in the state? Maybe not in the district, but at least in the state.
Well, a
It's
couple of
big
ways.
state.
We were talking about this the other day. So online is one way. We have
Right.
the Texas residency requirements are when you move in the system, you have to live here for, say you move in from out of state, your parents get transferred, you have to live here for a year and establish residency.
It takes a year for
Right, 12
establishment.
months, right.
Okay, so for the first year, they would have to pay out of state or out of district.
Then they become a Texas resident, so then they drop down to this other.
Not if they lived in the district. If they moved into the district, they become
Yeah.
established
yeah, after the
residency
year,
and
right,
become
right.
an in-district.
After the 12 months, right.
Right.
Yeah, right. It's just what you called about this, these are just business decisions to make it's the cost of doing business for us, so.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Is that, any questions about that, or, we've been boring in on our budget, as you can probably tell, to make sure that everything is, so it's not only so we can talk to you about that and see what you want to do about it, but since you're representing people in the community, our tuition is still really low compared to others. It just is. And so I am aware that we may lose some out-of-district students, but when you go back, can you just drop back for a second on the out-of-district? We've got a couple of areas around us. I mean, the students don't have that many options, but their option is to join the system if that's what they want to do. That is the option that they have. And so we've got a couple of ISDs that I just personally don't think we ought to be subsidizing their enrollments here when they could join and benefit from the entire system at actually a lower price. I mean, a $300,000 home, you're paying about $300 a month. I mean, $300 a month. You're paying about $300 a year, about $30, something like that. $25 a month you're paying. And you see the tuition cost here, so.
So then here is the overall recommendation on the revenue budget for FY18. The top part is the increases in that revenue budget. So in total, we're projecting an increase in new revenues of about $22.5 million, and you can see where that comes from. The 3.8 is the final number coming from state revenues, and as Dr. had mentioned, that's all from growth. The state allocation in total did not increase. Then the out-of-district, this is out-of-district and out-of-state international fees, is the $5 and then subsequent $10 increase in the spring. That would bring in $2.3 million. And then you can see the additional differential fees, technology fee. The enrollment growth, we're projecting at 2.4%. That is currently about what we believe we're going to see in enrollment growth this year. So we're simply projecting the same growth into next year. Then the property taxes, the 5% on existing properties, plus some additional new properties. Gets us to the $22.5 million. That would bring the total revenue budget for FY18 in at $373 million. 360 of which would be for the operating and auxiliary budgets. Dr. Head also mentioned repair and replacement needs of our facilities, so you can see that we've increased that from 5.5 to 5.7 million. It's a $200,000 increase. So our total expenditure budget would be $365.7 million. And this would allow us to increase the cash reserves to 16.5%.
You want some water?
No.
Oh, you have some, okay.
It's only sort of working. Excuse me.
When you first started working on the reserves, I can't remember what the percentages were. I think it's 14 something. And based on this additional amount, it'll take us to 16.5. How much of an increase has that been?
Well, so right now we are projecting to end this year at 15.4%. So this would increase from this coming August 31st to the following August 31st by almost slightly more than a full percentage point to the 16.5%.
You started in, when did you start, in January?
January.
What did we have, 14% or so, 14.5?
It was 14 something, but at that time the projection was to end this year at 16%. Since then, as we've dug into some things and been working on some cleaning up some things as well, that current projection is at 15.4%.
We're going to be in really good shape in next year, as we said we were. We're going to be in really good shape soon. We're in good shape now, I think, and
Just a question, because I think it relates to the reserves. How much in additional bonds do we have available to take to market?
To take to market, so it would be an additional 185 million that we have not yet sold.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, but for the,
Reserves are still necessary since we still have debt yet to be issued.
John, we lost all of our monitors up here.
yeah, in terms of issuing that.
We have no
Yeah.
monitors here.
All of ours.
All of them, yeah.
But the
Oh,
operating
I don't know what this is.
John, we've got a loose wire up here.
the debt service operating debt service fund balance separate from the operations fund balance, is that correct?
Yes, the debt service fund balance is separate. That's correct.
I was just asking, because the reserves plays a large role in our credit rating.
Right, the AAA rating, that impacts the interest rate that we would pay on the bonds that we would sell probably towards the end of 2018.
So if we didn't have any debt available to issue, then we don't have to be so concerned about reserves, but since we have 180 million yet to be issued, we should be concerned.
Yes.
What's our percentage coverage on our debt service?
I don't know that off the top of my head, the percent coverage.
But we have, did I get that correct? That
I didn't touch anything this time.
our debt service portion of our tax revenue is separate from the 7.6 million we're projecting for this budget?
Yeah, I'm trying to go back to this slide here. Yes, the debt service, so it's collected as, 1078 is the total between the two, but you have the M&O tax rate and the interest and sinking fund tax rate. So the debt service, it is its own separate fund, its own separate budget, really, and that detail would be included in what we put out in July. But that does go in separately as we collect that portion of the tax rate each year to pay off.
So out of the 1078, the debt service is it 2.38 or 2.58? What, out of the 1078, what's our debt service?
I think it's the 278, right? Yeah, it's the 278. We're 8 cents flat on the M&O rate.
So, calculation-wise, it's just 8 cents out of the money, or 8 cents out of that 1078 is going to.
Well, I guess it may not have been your question, but it raised a question, which is, when we're calculating the reserves, is that a function of just operating revenue? Or is that, so after debt service is stripped out, then we start calculating? Okay.
Yes, it's a percentage of the operating budget less debt service. So we do even back out the revenue debt service is included in the operating budget. So we back that out. So it's operating less debt service.
I have a question. The 3.8 million, how many new students did it take to get that state revenue?
3.8 million. What's the?
You said based on growth? We took it from other schools?
So basically, the way this occurs is it's kind of a backwards formula. They decide what the amount is they're going to put in the budget, and then they take a look basically at contact hours. So it's contact hours generated. So in contact hours are the amount of time that they actually spend in class, like an English class, a 3-hour English class is 48 contact hours. So, and they redo the formula to some extent every biennium. And so if you, especially on new money, so if you're growing, you get additional money. If you don't, so the simple answer is it is on head count and enrollments.
So if we keep getting increasing, they'll give us more money?
Somebody will give us more money, yes. We'll be yes. That's why, well, the presidents and the vice chancellors know this. It's just critical that we continue to grow and get the students that we should be getting, which is why we take a look at these percentages and we take a look at workforce, and you'll see in the performance metrics at the end, and we're rewarding those behaviors or those goals that we have. It's just the model. It is the economic model, and I talk to other presidents who go, where you shouldn't be focused on enrollments. Well, if you lose a couple of $1 million, then you need to be focused on enrollments. It's just the way the model is, and so that is our goal. Plus, we are only getting. You can see well, you don't need to go back, but you see we're only getting 15 out of our ISDs. We're getting 15 to 21 or 22% of the graduates. We should be getting more graduates than that. There's still plenty of room for growth out there, and we're only getting 4% of the population, so there's growth for us. There are people out there that
double that could double the 3.8.
I don't know about that. It depends on what everybody else does. We're measured against everybody else, but yes, I think that would, for while we're here, I'd be happy with that. Then we'll worry about the money later. So,
It's also measured in arrears.
yeah. Yeah, it is. It's about recruiting and enrollment management, yeah.
Excellent.
Right, and the state growth, it's also measured in arrears. So by the time they meet 2 years from now, they're going to be looking at the growth we have right now to
Right.
determine that.
I mean, we've got, Dr. Harvey Smith has been leading a group. We've been talking about enrollment management, which is really important. It's just important that we be focused on that, and so. But everything runs 2 years behind, right? The rewards for this, we're not going to, any growth that we have between now and 2019, we will not see it until 2019. So even if we grew, we're not going to see any additional money from the state. Even if we had 10% enrollments back to back, we're not going to see any additional money coming from the state.
So that's the revenue budget. And then this is the expenditure budget shown by fund. Of it, you can see that the majority of the activity occurs in the operating Fund 10.
This is just a different way to take a look at the budget, and really this is for the newer board members. So what we did last year was put it so that we can see it. This started out to be something for me so that I could see the various accounts and see where the money was. It's okay to move money from one account to the other, but I wanted to see it, and we want to be able to track it instead of just mixing the funds back and forth. You can do that, but I wanted to be able to see it myself. So
What's happening with column 13 or fund 13, whatever that is?
So Fund 13 is our repair and replacement fund that really does operate better as a capital projects type fund. So we are simply moving that from Fund 13 into one of the 40 series funds. That's where capital projects funds are. So each year that money goes into that fund, and that's where we do capital projects out of.
it's still there. We're just eliminating. We're eliminating the code 13, right? Yeah. Okay.
Right. We just, instead of doing those projects out of Fund 13, we were going to do it out of one of the 40 funds, which is where a lot of the bond projects are done out of right now. That's the 40 series are the capital project funds. And a lot of R&R, these are the large R&R, so they really are larger capital project type.
We have quite a few changes in terms of, well, I don't know about quite a few, but we have a number of changes to get items in the right category where they should be. Let's say that. How's that?
On columns 23, 24? Sorry. 23, 24?
Yes.
How far below the limit are we until it becomes a question of nonprofit status? Right? Are those the columns in which that's to be considered?
That's the
Yeah.
legal question of.
It's Fund 24 is the private, so that was, right, that was another one of the changes, right? Initially, last year, Fund 21, both educational tenants and private tenants were done all out of one fund.
Okay.
So that was a change done in this current fiscal year in 17 is Funds 23 and 24 split out educational versus business tenants. So the business tenants that you're asking about is Fund 24, that's occurring there.
Education tenant, so like the U of H downtown doesn't apply to that nonprofit.
Right, it does not.
Okay,
Um,
but
it-
on 24, then what's our cap that we need to stay under given our current budget?
So Fund 24, we had projected that we could lease up almost the entirety of the UP buildings 9 and 10. Right now, they're only about half leased up, and we are below the cap. We believe we could lease out almost the entirety of those buildings and still be below that cap. And if we wait another 2 years as some of the debt service falls off, we will be even further below that cap.
So the cap is about 10% of the total that we spent for the.
About 10% of it's on an issue by issue basis.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And in some cases, it's 5% when it's the pure private entities. So it is issue by issue as some of the debt service too also gets paid down, that calculation gets redone.
So if we had issued 200 million, 20 million would be the cap, right?
So, yes.
Depending on the
Roughly.
categorization, it could be as low as 5 to 7%. Okay.
You didn't ask this question, but we are keeping very close tabs.
I'm sure.
Very close.
Yeah. So, I mean, on this is where you can see, so these are all of the funds that are included in the cash reserve, right? So the bond funds that are over in the 4 series capital projects, we don't count that towards cash reserve, right? So the 3 series, 4 series, that doesn't get counted. What's included is all of the funds right here in our 10 series and 20 series. So again, this is where you can see addition to reserves out of these. But there is still some things that occur in here. For example, the student activity fund that is not truly unrestricted. So those funds can only be used back for student activities under state law. The Fund 15, that's the tech fee fund, right? That is by policy limited use to technology for the whole system. So this to show you all of the different funds in the expenditure budget that all counts towards that cash reserve balance.
We're going to come back early in the fall or later this summer and talk to you about 23 and 24 and how we're handling that, what our proposals are for University Park and the tenant piece. We're actually getting that. I think we're in pretty good shape with that. And we'll come back with some recommendations.
So for the expenditure budget, this shows how it's split by functional expenses. And this is really, it is literally the same percentages as the current budget year. There's not a change in the allocation. So 55% to instruction, 15% to student services, and another 14% to facilities. And this, again, is unchanged from the current budget year. So now, if you didn't notice, just going back to this slide real quick, where you see the recommended budget additions, we have split it by the strategic priorities. So you can see how much is going to each item there. And then this section is where we, again, to detail that separation. So of our new revenues, for example, 36% is being recommended for academic and workforce program quality, 32%, really 38% in total for culture, but 32% of that for compensation-related items, another 9% for student success items, and financial responsibility and accountability is 16% recommendation of our new expenditures. So under academic and workforce program quality, it's an additional $9 million. This includes, the primary thing is the new facility funding, right? Dr. Head showed the slide earlier of all the new facilities coming online. So this funding covers the actual operations of those new facilities, but also program costs to then utilize the facilities for the students. There's also 30 new faculty put in the budget for next year. College growth, this $1 million, we then talk about even more detail a little bit later as to the allocation to the different campuses. We've also included some startup costs for the BSN BAT program. And then again, here you can see I've already mentioned the $200,000 increase to repair and replacement. So in total, $9 million going to academic and workforce program quality of new expenditures. Then student success is $2.2 million. Here we have performance metrics. That's another item that we will discuss in a bit, how that got allocated. But there's also diversity initiatives, some additional marketing dollars, and some additional student advisors and disability services, and some money more going into developing the online platform. Culture for compensation. So that 32% for culture compensation is $8.1 million. There's a proposed across-the-board 2% pay increase for all full-time and part-time personnel. We're also picking up any increases in state benefit costs. And then there's some additional, through HR projects, some classification projects that would affect pay.
I just want you to see what a 2% raise is. It's $4.1 million, and people ask us, well, why don't we give a 4% or a 3% or whatever? Because there's only so much money to go around, so we have to make decisions about this. Do we have the CPI for?
Yeah, for the year ending April 2017, it is 2% for the Houston metro area.
So it's basically an inflation raise, plus we pick up right now, our plans are to pick up the state benefits. If there's, every year, they seem to pass along additional benefit costs to us, and we have historically picked those up for our employees, so. And we have, let me just talk to you just for a minute. Mario, do you want to talk about the educational attainment just for a minute? Talk about what we're doing with the last two.
With faculty educational attainment, we have a lot of faculty members. We have 880 faculty members. About 300 of them have PhDs. And so up until now, essentially, when you came to work here with the minimum requirements, which is a master's degree, it was not a salary-setting event to get a PhD, so you were not moved to the PhD track. And so what we're going to do is starting September 1, if the budget gets approved, we are going to make sure that faculty members that get a PhD get moved from the master's category into the PhD category on our pay bands. So that's what the faculty educational attainment is for. It's roughly about 47 faculty members that are going through the process right now. And so we're also going to go a little bit back and try to sort of equal the band for everyone. People that have already gotten their PhD that didn't get the salary setting event, and so it's going to cost about $1 million to fix all of that. The pay band classification project essentially is we are trying to go back and make sure that similar jobs are compensated equitably, both internally and externally, and essentially that is money to potentially give people increases, essentially, and we're going to really try to not, and I think Dr. Head has made a commitment to not sort of give people pay cuts or sort of demote people, and so that money is essentially to, you know, if you're doing, for example, jobs of a manager, but you're not called a manager, then we're going to move you up to a manager position and you're going to get a commensurate increase, and so that's where the $850,000 goes.
This is the second phase. We went through the faculty compensation. We made those adjustments that should have been made before, and we're just going back with the staff and trying to.
So this is staff, not faculty, on the pay band classification?
That is staff.
Okay, so does,
Right.
there's still a question around salary compression among faculty?
Yes, if there's still a question about salary compression?
Still concerned about that?
Not really. I would be lying to you if I told you that there's definitely employees that feel that there is compression and they would like adjustments, but from a systematic standpoint,
We made a considerable adjustment last year,
Yeah.
and we spent a lot of time on
I was
this.
just wondering if that was.
Well, I think it is, but no matter what we do, we had some people that want to go back to 1970 or so, and we're at 73 or 75. They wanted to go back like 20 years, and we, the issue with us was over the last 7 or 8 years. Is that when we really started taking a
correct.
look?
We had a vendor come in and essentially do some things that we are trying to remedy now. And so that's exactly the issue with the faculty educational attainment, is that when you start moving 40 people, that affects people on both sides of those moves. And so that's why it sort of gets very expensive very fast, because the people who already had PhDs, for example, on the faculty side, they don't want people who just got PhDs to sort of jump them. And so it really is sort of like squeezing a balloon on one end. It expands on the other end.
So last year we focused on faculty, this year we're trying to get staff brought in line.
Yes. that's
Correct.
So excuse me for going back a little bit. I've been kind of mulling this over. It seems to me that 2 or 3 years ago, you brought forward a plan to add 50 new faculty each year, and we're not hitting that target. We're adding 30 here, and that impacts, if we have student growth, but faculty isn't keeping pace, then how are we on our full-time, part-time ratio?
We're actually in pretty good shape there. Our 5-year projections put us at 53 full-time. We've gone through this quite a bit. So I actually right now I think we're on target. A couple of things have happened. One is our growth slowed down a little bit, and the other was the SIP plan, the separation incentive plan. We're going to take a look at this and see. But right now it's a combination of a budgeting issue, but we are on target to get there in the time frame that we set. I think we looked at it today. In the 5-year plan, we had 50, 50, 50, 50. We can go 30, 35, 35, 35, and still, something like that, and still get there.
Still hit the 50%.
So to answer your question, I think we're on target, and I'll give you those numbers and show you exactly where we think we're going to be by year, actually.
Thank you.
I have a question again on faculty. And regarding salary and compensation, how are we, compared to like other colleges?
So you want to answer that, or you want me to answer? Go ahead.
No, I don't, I honestly don't know how we compare to other colleges.
Are you talking about the salary increases that we're proposing, or overall?
Overall.
Yeah, we actually have the surveys on that. So we have, I have to get you the exact numbers, but we know where we stand. It never is apples to apples. So, for example, we're number 4 or 5 in the state with adjuncts, and when we take a look at the average faculty salary, it's never apples to apples, because if you look at the average, like at Lee, they're going to be higher because they've had people that have been there for 35 years or 40 years, 35 years. And so I'll get you all those numbers, though. We have
There's a lot of variables that we have to compare.
yes, but we take a look at that to make sure that we're within a reasonable range. Our goal has not been to be the highest paid. It was to be one of the higher paid so that we could attract and keep good people. I do not
To
think
be
that-
competitive, I guess.
Yes, that's correct. We'll get you those, we'll get you where we are, knowing that it's hard to decipher that. So, on the pay raise issue, though, let me, I sent a note to the colleges that are peer colleges, which are the larger colleges. They're all, first of all, we're a month ahead of them in the budget. So every one of them said, we don't know yet, we're not there yet. And I'm thinking, well, this is, okay. So they all sent me a note back and said between 2 and 3% were their projected raises. And one big college sent me a note and said they're thinking 4 to 3, but they weren't going to do that until January, which is really, that's not a 4 to 3, that's a 2 to 1.5 if you wait till basically. So I think we're competitive with that, and we have been over the years. Other people don't have faculty compensation studies or compression studies. They don't make adjustments on the staff like we're doing. So we have the raises. They also don't pick up the insurance benefits the way we do. When the state's been passing those on, we've been picking those up ourselves, and to be fair to our employees. So.
Yeah, and we have that survey as well of what other colleges are planning, and yeah, no one's really above 3%. Everyone's kind of telling us they're thinking 2 to 3% themselves. So that's culture for compensation, and then some more culture non-compensation items. The big one here is safety and security. So we're proposing to add 38 new. It would be 34 guards and 4 officers that would add additional security at the centers.
Make sure so we got campus security, but this is kind of a separate issue. We've got the new buildings and centers coming up. We want to make sure that we have we're going to be hiring security guards, more security guards, but they're going to be accompanied by a person with a gun, right? So we would have a certified police officer. At any one time, we want to make sure that we've got 2 people at all times, and we've only had 1 in some places, so we want to make sure that there's always 2 people there to assist each other, and just provide for the protection. So where I think our challenge has been these centers that opened, we want to make sure that we've got somebody kind of in the building, basically inside the building and outside the building at all times. So that's why we're adding so many officers and security guards at one time. The money is actually, so next year we're going to come back and there'll be, so really what you're seeing is half a year. Or we've got those staggered. It actually costs more money than that. But the way we do the hiring, we will post the jobs and then we start hiring in the fall. We'll have those staggered, and when those centers open up, we'll have additional people there.
Yeah, so you will likely see an additional amount for the FY19 budget to pick up that full year.
Are there any federal funds available for security for college districts? Or
looking at Rand, but I don't think so, not for what we do. We would only, most of those kind of funds, we would only qualify if we were in certain income levels, and we're just not, that's not our system. So, at lower income levels.
So the next strategic priority for partnerships, here we do have a lease for an oil and gas training facility. That's $100,000 with Baker Hughes. There is also a small business development match. It's a grant from University of Houston, and this would provide some of the matching dollars towards that grant. And then some additional sort of office support services for development ed and dual credit programs. Then finally, for the strategic priorities under financial responsibility and accountability, this is about $4 million in new expenditures in this area. You can see the revenue bond that this comes out of the M&O portion of the tax rate. That debt service is increasing from $7.5 million to $8.5. But there, one of the things that was benefited is, I think originally the FY17 payment was 8.5, and a refunding was done that generated savings that lowered it to 7.5. And so now next year is when that payment goes back up to 8.5 million. And then you can see here some additional items at the really the system office level of where those areas are getting additional recommended funding. Also on here, you see moved positions off of bonds. This is as we are working through the bond funding. There are some positions that really best practices we would rather, especially as it winds down, not be funded by that bond money. So there's a thought for a 3-year period to move some of that personnel off of that bond funding. So then on the performance metrics, first we had the $1 million in campus growth funding. So what this table shows you is how that got allocated out to the different campuses. It was done, it was split by academic growth versus workforce growth, because workforce programs do tend to cost more. So out of the $1 million, 60% was allocated for workforce and 40% for academics. So based on those growths, you can see how those funds got allocated by campus.
So let me make sure the board understands this. So we allocated $2 million directly to the colleges. Now, of the budget, the overall budget increase, they pick up about 65%
of
going directly to the college. In other words, we put it in the budget, like the security guards may be in the system, or police and the security are in this. We put those in the system budget, but then those are farmed out. So the colleges benefit from that. The faculty are in the system budget, but when they hire them, we put the money out. In this particular case, the money comes directly to the colleges. So, so that's the way the state is moving this state model. So we put $2 million in this account, and then it's divided up. $1 million, and the college presidents worked with they worked with you over this at the end, and so $1 million is going for growth, and $1 million is going for performance metrics, and that's how we carve up the money to the colleges directly for the college presidents' use.
So yeah, this slide shows how the $1 million for the performance metrics was allocated among the campuses.
So as we go in future years, what the state is talking about doing is increasing the amount of money in the performance funding, and this is based on their model. So really what we would like to do is move more and more. I understand the growth issues because we have some fast-growing colleges, but overall, the things that we're focused on are these FTSC, this first time in college persistence and writing completion. Those are the goals that were set by the state, and that's the way they're funding us in part. But we helped write those, so this is what we want the colleges to focus on. And there's more in this, there's more than this. So we actually have, going forward, we will put additional performance metrics in there. For example, Ken, when we have like African American success rates or Hispanic rates, whatever we identify, we'll put money in there to help provide the colleges with money that meet the goals that we set. And the college presidents are setting those goals. They're not some, correct me if I'm wrong over that, they're not some arbitrary goal. You all are setting the metrics over this, something that's reasonable.
What was the 21% growth workforce for
Yeah, go back to
Tomball?
Those are contact hours. That's
Contact hours.
straight up contact hours. So we have a formula that we're rewarding workforce more than the academic side because that's where we were the weakest. So if you do, I mean, the reality is if you increase your workforce, then you get more money because you can tell from what happened at Tomball there.
Is there any one particular area of workforce in Tomball that accounts for that growth?
Oh, okay.
I think when you'll see some of the new buildings open, you'll see some of these others come back up again. On North Harris, for example, has the, what are you calling that building? Your new. Okay. Anyway, he's got a workforce building coming up, and then Cy-Fair has the center coming up, which I think you're going to see a pretty significant jump there when the IT programs are going to be in that new facility that we have. So we're trying to get we're trying to get the dollars aligned with what our strategic goals are. So that everybody knows what they should be working on, and then give them some discretionary money so that we have these special projects. And I think I will say things like LivePath, for example, which is to be housed at Tomball, and then the system office needs to put up the money over that to begin with, and then put it in their budgets, and then they have it after that. And same thing with the African American Initiative. We will have that in the system budget, but the colleges, the money and the operations go to the college. Now, in that particular case, Quentin Wright I've asked him to kind of oversee that and make sure we get off to a good start over that. But ultimately, we can't run things from the system office. The colleges have to run that. I'm really clear about that. But we want to make sure we're all doing the same thing, and we measure. So if we're looking at what we're doing with African American initiatives, we need to do better than what we've been doing, and I know we can do that. So, okay.
If I may, just, from the system office, I think the very important part of that, and I did speak to Dr. Wright the other day about some of this, but we want to make sure that communication among the different programs within each campus, because you're right, the work is done at the campus, at each college, but the way when there's something that works and everybody needs to really do it. I mean, that's the most important part, communication to me. Yeah.
Well, it sounded like you sat in on our meeting today. So yes, I met with the presidents it seemed like longer than was it an hour and a half? It just seemed like longer than that. But no, we talked about the communication issues and how important. In a large system like ours, that's probably the number one issue we have is about communication. Most people are trying to do the right thing. Sometimes other people don't know they're trying to do the right thing. But I agree with you.
So to highlight, right, as was mentioned, so we're in this proposed budget framework that we're putting together. $22.5 million in new revenues is what's projected. 65% of that is going to the campuses in one form or another. We're doing 2% across the board pay increases, 30 new faculty, new advisors, and then this $2 million in growth and performance funding that did go directly to the campuses. And then more system-wide, right, there's the increase for safety and security, the additional funding for new facilities, and actually that goes directly to the campuses, ultimately that $4.8 million. Funding for the new BSN, BAT programs, and then some of the fee increases that we've discussed. Summarizes really what this proposed framework is. And really right now, we are still building this budget at a detailed level. So this is the framework that we're working with to build it. And the plan from here would be for us to continue to build the budget at the detailed level using this framework, and then come about the third week of July, we can release then the detailed budget at a really line item, however detailed you'd like it. We can have summary tables, but then also the detail, have that released in the second half of July, and then at the August 3rd board meeting is when the budget would actually be in front of the board.
I think you know this already, and some of you have, but if you have, in the meantime, if you have any questions at all, feel free to, you can either send a note to me, you can contact Jennifer directly if you have questions. We've already talked to a couple of you. If you'd like to see the detail later when we get it, you're welcome to see it. We want this budget to be as transparent. Whatever it is you need out of this, we'd be glad to give it to you. The only thing that we need to add, and that's my fault because I had a note to do it, we are taking a look at, well, we're talking about a 2% raise. We're also talking about a minimum for we're taking a look at our lowest paid employees to get them up to a livable wage, and we're not quite sure what that is right now. So we're probably going to come back to you in the next meeting and go, here's what we're thinking about.
Yeah, I have some estimates that I'm reviewing on that.
So it'll be a 2% or something like a minimum. We're trying to decide what that minimum should be. So some people, we're going to get more than, normally what happens is some people get more than the 2%, especially if they're on the bottom side of that.
Might I suggest that you consider eligibility for food stamps as a benchmark we might want to avoid?
Okay. We've been looking at a couple of different, areas, okay.
When you're putting this together, I feel it should be related to the board policies. And when we approve a budget, I know that there's allowed to be some movement from fund to fund, assuming the funds aren't restricted. So I think I'd like to see this so that it's identified in the details as to which funds and what are tripwires that would require board authorization to make a budget change.
I mean,
Am I saying this clear enough?
so budget, budget change from fund to fund. We do not have authorization to move budget from fund to fund. So the budget that this board approves, if we were going to make changes to that, we'd have to come back to the board to do that.
Go back to
The numbered funds, 13.
the buckets that I think I understand what you're talking about, and we were talking today about having a workshop in, again, October, so we could talk about budgets, the 5-year plan. We were talking about where we are with the bonds. We were talking about indexing maybe in the future that had been suggested, because she's working on a couple of different models for that, kind of the growth and the way we see things. But this is what you're talking about right here, right? Sort of, more or less.
Yes.
In the broad sense, okay.
Yeah, but some of these are broken down and more fine, I think.
Yeah, well, they are, but for example, and I'd be glad to talk to you about this, or you talk to Jennifer, because we can't move money out of the student activity fund and the technology. We can't use those for other items outside of that, the way we have it set up. Some of the funds we could take the auxiliary business tenants if we chose to and use it back for some other funds, but that's what we're going to talk to you about. We're trying to get away from all that. That was what was happening in the past, and we don't want to do that unless you know, well, first of all, the CFO and the chancellor need to know, and then I would come to you and go, here's what we're doing at University Park, and we're going to move, we think, I mean, some of that we would be using for scholarships, and some of it, if we needed it, we can always pull on that money, but we don't want to go there unless we have to anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
But
what
we can
about
talk.
the division the other way? So in the horizontal columns, if you wanted to move money from academic and workforce program quality down to student success, does that require alerting the board?
Within the strategic priorities, those are set by Lone Star College. Within the budget, we could move within the priorities.
Those are just artificial, where we put them in there based on kind of our strategic goals. And normally, we wouldn't be doing that unless there'd have to be some reason, because that money is all going to somebody. So we'd have to have some compelling reason to move it from one place to another.
Right. I mean, as you see from the following slides that we went through, it's all for very specific things. It's not just sort of a $9 million big bucket. It's for specific items that we're expecting to occur.
Part of that is when things do come up in the middle of the year, and that's why we have a contingency. normally have to borrow out of trustees Mariel's budget to pay for your budget. We take it out of the contingency if something came up. Like in the middle of the year, if we had some special, something that came up, and I don't know, let's just say the African American Initiative popped up in the middle of the year, or some new project, we don't take that out of we take it out of the contingency and go, we'll pay for that, and then we'll put it in the operating budget the following year. So. One thing I'd like to say is Jennifer is, not only has she worked hard, and the college presidents are putting together their budgets, it all comes into, the vice chancellors, it all comes into one big budget, so you're not seeing, all we're presenting to you is the big budget. And so each one of them has responsibility for their budget. So there's a heck of a lot of work that goes into this, as you can imagine, in putting the pieces together, and the staff work that goes in behind this. I know that every time we're meeting, Maura, I see your name pop up because you add those little columns in there. And Tammy, there's a number of people working on all this, and I know that, and they're sitting out there, so thank you.
The finance team
There's
has
a lot
been
of work
great.
that goes on to this. The other thing I'm going to point out is Jennifer is not going to be at the regular meeting tonight. She is receiving her honor, or she's going to the banquet for the 40 under 40, being recognized for that. So normally I'd like for everybody to be here, but I excused her for that. So she can. Other questions you have about that? Keep in mind that we can answer questions on July the 26th. In the meantime, I don't mind at all. Matter of fact, if you have questions, feel free to contact her directly, or me, either one. If you contact me and ask me specific questions, I'm just going to go, Jennifer, can you get back with trustee vote and answer the questions? I know the general stuff. She knows the specifics, or her staff does, so, okay.
Now, who's handling your portion while you're gone tonight?
What was it?
Who's handling your section of the agenda?
The chancellor.
Yeah, okay. Well, the reason why I asked, I decided to study the financial statement this time and have a whole bunch of questions. So what I might do is hold off until next month to pose those questions.
I will definitely be here next month, and if you still want to ask us questions, I can talk to you whenever you'd like.
Thank you. You're so
Sure, thank
nice.
you.
If you'll write them down, I'll just forward them to her.
Are there any other questions, comments, discussion items? If not, the Board of Trustees, in accordance with Section 551.001 of the Texas Government Code, will move into closed session. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. That's what Kyle asked, yeah. The special financial meeting is now closed. It's fine, right. But now do we have to move into closed session?
Now we have to open.
Open, okay.
But you can't,
All right.
but you can't open until 5.
This is real confusing to me.
It's 5 o'clock
Got you,
now.
okay. Is it 5 o'clock now?
5 o'clock, time to open it.
Okay. Our regular,
Hey, Jennifer?
it's fine, it's fine.
Thank you.
Never mind.
Here. Oh.
No,
I will now, okay,
I'll ask you.
I think I have it straight now. I will now call the regular monthly meeting to order. But we're going to move directly into closed session.
You got to certify, you got to go through the whole thing.
Okay.
Pledge of
Okay.
allegiance.
Okay. All right, it'll be correct the next time then. The regular meeting is now called to order. Dr. Head, will you certify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yeah, certify that the meeting was posted in accordance with the law.
Thank you.
Are we pledging the flag?
No. So now I'm going to move into closed session.
Right.
The Board of Trustees, in accordance with Section 55.001 of the Texas Government Code, will move into closed session under one or more of the following provisions of the Act. Section 551.071, consultation with attorney, status of pending litigation on any items on the agenda. Then Section 551.072, deliberation regarding real property, LSC University Park, LSC Cy-Fair, LSC North Harris, LSC Tomball, LSC Montgomery, LSC Kingwood, LSC Systems Office, and finally, Section 551.074, Personnel Matters. Six, yeah. The meeting will not start until 6 o'clock or after. So I'll see you at 6 or after.